Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to this week's Tech Talk here with me, Tri from Zyxel. I'm one of the senior product managers here at Zyxel. I've been here about 15 years now. Been in the networking industry for over 20 years now. And this is basically a weekly discussion forum that we like to run every Tuesday at 11 p.m. Pacific. 11 a.m. Pacific, to provide really a quick kind of informative session that's interactive. We want you to ask questions if you have anything, if you want to add to the chat. Send me those messages, especially at the topic at hand. So we'll have a quick introduction of who Zyxel is. We'll present a little bit of the discussion topic, and then we'll do a live Q&A at the end as well. So get those questions in, get them posted, and we'll be sure to get to those as we go. And also don't forget to follow us on Facebook as well. So let's go ahead and get started. A little bit about Zyxel. We've been around actually this week on Thursday. We are actually celebrating our 30 years of networking experience with, in the networking industry. We've been around for 30 years since 1989. We have over 1,500 employees worldwide, empowering businesses, over 700,000 businesses in 150 different markets, and then making connections with over 100 million devices worldwide. So we offer a comprehensive commercial portfolio here at Zyxel, anything from security appliances, wireless access points, LAN switches, which is what we'll be talking about a little today, gateways for hotspot, those kinds of routers, and also being able to use it from a network management standpoint in the cloud or in a standalone solution. So again, wide range. So really a one-stop shop for all of your networking needs. That's what I usually tell our partners and our customers. Anything that you can plug into a network, we have some sort of technology that will provide for that kind of access. So today we wanted to talk about 10 gig switching, and I kind of came up with this kind of fun phrase with a back-breaking speed without breaking the bank. So really an affordable 10 gig. Now, usually in the past, people have gone, well, 10 gigs is a little bit more expensive or too expensive for what I need. I don't really need 10 gig because I don't want to pay the cost. But now actually the technology has gone very affordable in the sense that it is definitely something to be considered. And the applications that are involved are really pushing towards that as well, especially with wireless 11A, like AC, AX, those kinds of technologies using multiple, really pushing that gigabit throughput performance and kind of really making sure that it's actually putting strain on the network itself. I think typically what most people will kind of come into play is they just usually buy a switch kind of off the shelf. They just kind of pick up something because I just need some ports to connect. But I think that's where that's where partners can come into play and really add value on how to make sure to structure the backbone of the network to be as reliable and as to be robust as possible. To make sure that is always on, because that's kind of the core kind of networking component that is kind of the central traffic pusher of your entire network. So you don't want that to bottleneck. You don't want that to go down. So you want that reliability to be really high in these kinds of situations. How many of you, by just a raise of hands, just to kind of get a kind of a gauge of the landscape here, how many of you already are pushing or using 10 gig into your customer networks, or even, I guess, in your networks, probably, if you're running a data center? But if you could show me, just raise your hands on how many are actually using 10 gig today. And then I guess it seems like just a couple of you. Okay, fantastic. I think that's one of those things too, is that the adoption is not as much, but now we're seeing servers, we're seeing computers that are now offering a 10 gig. If you're deploying backup scenarios that are in the local backup side, then you're also using potentially 10 gig in those kinds of situations. Okay, great. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background about just the naming conventions when we do get to kind of the product itself, to understand basically the Zyxel naming convention. So ES stands for an Ethernet switch. That's just 10/100 ports. GS is our gigabit switch, so it just has gigabit ports that are on the switch. XS is our all 10 gig, including multi-gig switches. So the X is just the Roman numeral for 10. So just remember that. Now, XGS means that there are 10 gig uplinks, but primarily it's a gigabit switch. So all the main ports, let's say the 24 ports, are all gigabit ports, and then they come with additional dedicated 10 gig uplinks, whether it be copper, but typically they're SFP plus fiber. MGS is just a Metro Ethernet switch. And then at the end of the name, if you see a P or HP, that means it's a PoE switch. The HP is just the high power PoE plus. Pretty much all of our switches now that we have in the market are all HPs. So just keep that in mind. And also if there's an F at the end, that means it's a fiber port. I think today we'll be talking primarily about 10 gig and probably PoE kind of switches. So SFP just means that they're gigabit fiber uplinks. Those are the transceiver ports where you actually have to put a transceiver in order to connect fiber to the switch. And then there's SFP plus ports that are 10 gig versions of that as well. Now we do sell what we call a direct attached cable, which is basically fiber and a transceiver kind of built into one. So you don't have to be a fiber expert in order to connect them. You can use them then to uplink each other, the different switches together. We have 1 meter and 3 meter cables that come into play for that. Now, switch stacking is another kind of naming convention or a feature set that a lot of people have been asking us. But I think there's kind of two things. One is there is traditional just stacking where people just say, hey, I just want to put 2 switches together and I want to be able to uplink them together, right? That's just kind of just stacking in general. You just put a stack of switches and you daisy chain them together, or you build a fiber ring, or you build a ring out of them as they're all in the stack. Now we also offer what we call kind of the real kind of switch stacking, when typically you'll see the LEDs that have like numbers on the switches themselves. And what that does is when you stack them together, they basically become kind of like one logical switch per se from a management standpoint, so that you'll see, let's say if you had 2 24 ports and you stack them together, it will act or at least configure like a 48 port switch. So you just have to go into one GUI and be able to manage all of that as if it's a logical switch. Now we do have something called virtual stacking as well, but virtual stacking lets you kind of move between the different switches, up to 24 switches in that network to be able to manage it. But you could still enter the management portal basically through the main switch, the primary switch, and then from there you can hop to any of the other switches to make any kind of configurations you want. So that's virtual stacking there. So we have basically the just stack them together stacking. We have switch stacking that makes them into a logical, and then we have a virtual stacking that comes into play. And all of those are just all helpful, different ways of being able to manage those different switches. And what I wanted to cover is primarily in the middle, the XGS 1930 series. This is what we call our affordable 10 gig switch. It's very cost effective. It has a lot of the features that you would need. It comes both with not only the 10 gig connections, but also with and without high power PoE. So up to 375 watts of PoE budget. And it has multiple modes. It's zero touch provisioning capable. So you can use it both in the standalone and in the cloud. And you can use it in, like I said, standalone or in the Nebula cloud to be able to manage it all in the kind of the mass network into a central network pane to be able to manage not only your switches, your gateways, your access points in the Nebula cloud. So all those Nebula cloud supported products are all grouped together there. And it's very powerful especially for a small business. If you're managing multiple small businesses as a partner or as an MSP, you're able to have visibility in each one of those sites and be able to troubleshoot, be able to do reporting, all that kind of thing. So I'll talk a little bit about the benefits of the cloud in just a bit. But the XGS 1930 is very cost effective. If you look online now, pretty much like compared to like the equivalent Netgear D-Link switches, we're like 30-40% less right now. We're really killing the market in terms of that because we know that the product can be very cost effective. We want to really make a splash in the market to really bring and kind of push forth the notion that 10 gig can be affordable. So having that uplink, be able to build those kinds of networks is very cost effective now. And of course, there's a lot of key features that are there as well in the web managed space that allows for you to do pretty much everything. I think most of our partners gravitate towards the 1900 the 1920s and the 1930 series products for a lot of their applications. Stuart asks, what copper networking cable standards does your 10 gig ride on? So the copper is going with 10G base T, standards for. All you need basically is Cat 5 or Cat 6, depends on what you kind of the full throughput that you need. Usually it's I think it's Cat 5e will do 10 gig. So as long as you have that, then it's capable of riding that. And we do copper on certain ports, but in this particular case, the XGS, those are 10 gig uplinks that are actually fiber SFPs. So these are fiber SFP plus ports that you'll find on this particular series. Now we do have some XS series switches that are all 10 gig switch ports, which have combinations of 10 gig copper and then also 10 gig fiber as well. So we'll see some of that as well. The 10 gig switches for the XGS 1930s, again, those ports you'll see there on the side there, 4 fiber SFP ports. So compared to some of the competitors that just maybe only have 2, you're able to link aggregate them. You can daisy chain them. So usually what we'll have is if there's 4 ports, you can then take 2 of those ports, go to, let's say, a second switch using a 10 gig SFP direct attached cable. And you can link aggregate them together. So you can, in essence, get a connection or an uplink between 2 switches, let's say, for 20 gigs. Now you can also link ag all of them. So you can go between 2 switches. So you can go 4 ports to 4 ports if you want. And that would give you a total of 40 gigs worth of uplink between the 2 switches. So you can see how just kind of putting it together, you can have basically a better throughput, no bottleneck. Now, if you're using just a traditional 10 gig switch, you can only get 1 gig out of excuse me. You can only get 1 gig out of those uplink ports that are there typically. You can still link aggregate gigabit ports together, of course, to get more bandwidth, but this makes it a lot better because now you have 24 port or 48 ports trying to go out and uplink, and usually that's where the bottleneck will reside, right? So especially in applications where you may have like I said, 11AC or even 11AX access points that need PoE power and already are pushing close to the gigabit throughputs or even going over at times. That's where this comes into play, because then now your uplinks can handle the traffic that is going through your entire network. Now, if you only have 1 switch, I mean, or at least 24 or just only 48 customers or devices connected with these ports, then maybe 10 gig might not be kind of suitable for that. Usually it's a, you're going between different switches and you want to have a high throughput, or you still could use it if, for example, you have a backup that uses 10 gig interface, or a server or a virtual appliance that is running a lot of the your CRM tools and things like that are using 10 gig as an uplink or as a port. Then you can connect it to one of these ports. Now, there's also transceivers that will convert these SFP ports into like a copper Ethernet. So you can buy those as well to plug in and turn one of these fiber ports into a copper 10 gig port if you'd like. So there's options for you to do that. Again, we have 24, 48 ports with gigabit uplinks, gigabit ports, and with and without PoE. Now, I mentioned earlier that this switch line is our hybrid switch, again, meaning that it has Nebula Flex. Flexing means it could be in a standalone mode, but you can standardize on this switch to give it whether you're using without the cloud or with the cloud. So it actually comes with free cloud as well. So there's a no license, free Nebula Cloud access to using these switches. So you can already put it into the Nebula Cloud. Now there are some feature functions, or there's some feature sets about site management or cloning of sites that are only available in the professional version. So you can always upgrade and move to that. But a lot of our customers are just looking for, hey, I need some quick way to auto provision to be able to get visibility into the network, be able to troubleshoot the network. And so this is your option for 10 gig. So this is one of the few, unless you're going to like Cisco Meraki or something like that, for the small business, for the SMB, this is the 10 gig switch for, with a cloud option. So this is kind of the first hybrid version of a switch that provided you that. So we've had this for a little bit while now. So definitely take a look at that. It also has smart fan design. Make sure that it's not only operating cool, but also quietly when it needs to be. And of course, 375 watts of total power, and using it in a very smart and intelligent way to make sure you can maximize that budget, but can support up to 30 watts per port. And by default, it's also in consumption mode, which is actually the more efficient way of doing that. So yeah, we've standardized on that part. Nebula Flex, again, just being able to simply switch between standalone mode or into the cloud if you'd like. So again, just being able to pick one hardware platform or even like one set of portfolio to use for all of your networking needs, whether it's cloud or not. Now we do, like I mentioned earlier, some other access or some other equipment or some other models as well that support 10 gig. So I wanted to touch that. Primarily, I wanted to highlight the affordable one, which was the 1930s. And again, if you find the 1930s, if you look for them online, they're very, very cost effective. Now, those are also, just the visible street price. What you get as a partner and the discounts that you get is very important as well. So that's where we can make sure that even at that price that you see online, you can still make margin, make your percentage points that is necessary for you to support the customer and support your business. So we'll cover the partner part at the end. These switches are 10 gig, the XS 1920s. Those are our all 10 gig ports. So we'll see they're 10 gig 10 gig 10G base T copper ports, and then there's 2 combo ports. So you have a total of potentially 12 ports of usage for 10 gig. Now, this is great as maybe a concentrator, or maybe it's not made as a data center concentrator because it doesn't have like all the layer 3 functions that you may need. But as a layer 2 switch with VLAN, QoS, all that kind of stuff for 10 gig, it's all here in that XS 1920. XGS 2210. So this is basically the bigger brother of the 1930s that we just saw earlier. The affordable, cost-effective ones. These are also affordable, cost-effective. The main difference that between this switch and the 1930s is that this one is a we call full layer 2 managed switch, meaning that it also has not only the GUI to manage it through, but it also has CLI. So you can go through command line, you can SSH to it, telnet it, you can script to it so that you can do that command line, access to it. Do whatever you want to configure it via command line. But it also has the 4 SFP plus ports. And it comes in both flavors with and without 10 gig uplinks as well. So again, flexibility. Now we do have plans later on for a new model eventually that will be part of that Nebula Cloud as well. So just keep that in mind. But this one was really for more complex scenarios, or you're looking for, again, the CLI is the big difference. So if you're looking at doing your own kind of managed services where you've written your own front end system that your support uses to connect to it, to the device, to do changes and things like that, we have a lot of partners who use that CLI to do that today. So that, and also the different applications for the 2210s. There are applications where you need some additional port security functions, auto provisioning of traffic into different VLANs. Of those kind of priorities, that's where the 2210 comes into really a good play because it becomes more granular to be able to do all that. Also, I forgot to mention, also the 2210, one other difference, it does have some layer 3 features. It does have some like dynamic routing, I'm sorry, not dynamic, static routing functionalities in it, as well as some stacking features as well. So the XGS 3700, again, is even higher end. If you're looking for those kinds of applications for 10 gig, these are the ones that allow for you to have redundant power supplies that can be hot swappable. Again, they're stackable. They have 10 gig uplinks. Again, they're primarily gigabit switches by nature, but have layer 3 functions. So it has the dynamic, some static routing, OSPF, that kind of functionality to be able to do those layer 3 functions. And then our XGS 4600 is kind of our flagship product model, which has, again, dedicated dual output powers, both in DC and AC forms. But primarily, they are like kind of a telco grade equipment where the MAC tables are very high, the memory, all that, the packets are being pushed really quickly through it as well. But it has options for fiber and non-fiber. So if you have fiber, if you want to be a fiber ISP, this is the kind of product that you would use to deliver fiber to the home, fiber to the business from your data center. And these are just our fully layer 2 managed again. And one new product that we just launched as well, I wanted to touch up on, is our XS 3800. This is our hybrid multi-gig switch, which gives you 10 gig, not only 10 gig ports, both in copper or fiber SFP, and also gives you the advantage of using 16 SFP plus, or we have also dedicated 4 copper ports that can do multi-gig. So some of you may know, gigabit, you might know 10 gigabit, but we also have now what we call multi-gig. So it can do, 2.5 gig, it can do 5 gig and 10 gig kind of standards there to be able to push the kind of the intermediate bandwidth. Or we have customers who will just use 10 gig in general and just use 10 gig and just use bandwidth throttling to bring it to the different usage numbers there. So some of the accessories that you need to know about for the 10 gig are, the modules. So you have SFP plus modules in the middle. Those are the ones that you'll use to go multi-mode or single mode, either 300 meters or even up to 10 kilometers. So those are the ones where you need to put those transceivers into the SFP plus slots. And then you have to run your own fiber, or you have your, provider give you a fiber connector that will connect to it. Or on the right there, you'll see the direct attached cables. Those DAC cables come in 1 meter and 3 meter. And those are pretty much pre-made fiber cables with transceivers tacked onto the end of them already. So they're already kind of put together. All you got to do is plug and play as if they were just, uplink cables. Now, I'd mentioned some intelligent PoE functions. So I wanted to cover that. Basically, what we have is we have a display that tells you real time what is the consumption of the PoE on that device at that time. We also use what we call consumption mode, which really, instead of just putting aside the entire budget for that device on a port, let's say 30 watts, it actually just is more efficient and gives them what the product, or puts aside what the product actually is drawing. And of course, we provide support up to 375 watts, up to 30 watts per port, based on the budget. So here's an example of what I meant by the smart PoE. So typically, when you're doing PoE, there's one thing called classification mode. And in a 802.3 AT class, it's considered a class 4. So when the device boots up, the switch usually said, okay, what class are you? And the device will say, well, I'm a class 4. So the switch knows to reserve 30 watts aside in the budget. And that's part of the classification mode. And that's the typical default mode of majority of the switches that are out there in the market today. Some of them don't even have what we have in terms of the consumption mode. Now, 30 watts, if you wanted to power up, let's say 20 access points, that would cost you 30 watts times 20, which is 600 watts. So you would need actually a switch that had 600 watts of power supply in order to power up those devices. And that would be very expensive as well, because you're dealing with a large power supply. Now, in Zyxel's consumption mode, which is our intelligent PoE functionality, the AP actually only draws and uses 16 watts, right? Well, 16 watts in consumption mode times 20 is about 320 watts. Now, with a budget of 375, that means our device, our switch can then power up this access point, or up to 20 of these access points within the budget. So again, that's where consumption mode comes into great play to make sure that you're maximizing the budget or that you have, and using the power that you're actually, so you're not wasting extra power or paying for extra power that you're not even going to be able to use. Okay. We've also added some details into the new switch here, the XGS series and the GS series, to be able to provide you a real-time PoE usage. So again, those little indicators there you see on number 1 and number 3, that area. The number 2 is the cloud LED. So you could actually use it to figure out where, if it's actually connected to the cloud nebula or not. So again, standalone versus cloud mode. And then we have a cool new feature that has been added that lets you restore the product to a custom default, meaning that if you had some itch situation where somehow the switch seems like something is off or some sort of misconfiguration, you can actually restore it back to when you first installed it. So let's say when you first installed it, you said, okay, this is exactly what I want this network to look like and be. I can save that to this custom default. And then from that point on, every time you push the restore, it will just take you back to that default, not the factory defaults. So it's really good troubleshooting thing for you to be able to have somebody just go on site or somebody there locally to do that and kind of do the first step of troubleshooting. Now, again, the design that we have here for this, the PoE indicator, you can see that it will show you, 20 in increments of 20. So 20%, 80%, and when it gets 80%, it gets yellow. And then greater than 80% usage of PoE in terms of your budget, it'll have a red indicator. So the technician who's installing will know right away what if he has basically extra or enough power to add devices on. And then again, we're smart about using the fan speed again to make sure that the product is not only cool but also operating in a quiet manner if necessary, especially in an environment where maybe you're installing it under a desktop or in a rack that's in the prem. And we designed the product with quality in mind, making sure that all of the products use higher electrostatic protection and surge protection. A very robust fan as well, be able to manage and monitor those fan controls using solid state capacitors to ensure that it doesn't break and allows for a longer lasting product. So if you look at a lot of the MTBFs on the data sheets of these products, they're quite large, kind of in the order of anywhere from 75 to 125 years, is the mean time between failure because of the components that we're using, as well as a world-class power supply. We want to make sure that the power that's being delivered to the product is as stable as possible to make sure that it's also robust. Because again, capacitors, power supplies, and fans are probably the number one things that will break in any kind of electrical or in networking products, especially a switch that's sitting there. So we bring that design into play, which is where we can offer lifetime hardware warranty on the product. So here are some applications that we've been using this before. A pretty typical, kind of standard application in standalone, where you have kind of a network scenario here where you have your internet coming into, let's say, a security firewall that gets split into maybe a switch that has 10 gig uplinks. Those 10 gig uplinks are connected either to servers or to other 10 gig switches that have 10 gig uplinks. Again, now your core part of your network is running at at least 10 gig, unless you're doing link aggregation, which then you can get more, right? Like I mentioned earlier in the example. But then the other access level switches that go to the access points, goes to the desktops, goes to IP cameras, phones, anything like that. The mixed network there, again, you can go at a very high concentration of those products. All those devices can go back via 10 gig, right? The traditional way before with just gigabit ports, you can imagine 54 ports that has a mix of IP cameras, the traffic on phones, the traffic from the desktops, the traffic from wireless access points, all trying to going back to a single, gigabit port. So now all of that is now shrunk down into your bottleneck of a single gig, or maybe a couple of gigs if you did link ag. So that's where 10 gig comes into play for those high kind of density switches, going back to your central core via 10 gig, making sure that your overall network is much improved. So the cloud management scenario is basically the same thing, but now you have access to the cloud for your management. So this network per se, all of the devices that you would find here, for example, would be then appear or be able to be used in the cloud, where you would manage it in the cloud. So whether you have retail stores that you're managing, branch offices, campuses, boutiques, department stores, retail, whatever it may be for your applications, or even individual customers, doctors' offices and things like that, you can use the cloud to manage and get visibility of the whole organization. If you have a customer that has multiple sites, or you have different organizations, so each one of your customers can be an organization. Now, the cool thing with the Nebula Cloud is, of course, not only the visibility, but the management. For example, you could, with Nebula, you can literally copy and paste with the Pro version, be able to duplicate and clone a site. So let's say you had a established kind of a template, pre-configured template for a doctor's office or a dental office. You can then say, hey, I just got a new customer. You bring them on board. Your engineer just does a copy paste basically of the switch, gateway, AP, the whole site into a new site, and then change the parameters, right? Change the SSIDs to that doctor's office's name, change any passwords and things like that he needs. And the cool thing is that because of auto provisioning, those devices, the switch, the AP, and the gateway can just be scanned. You don't even have to take it out of the box because there's a QR code that's on the box that you can scan and add it to your network. So you can add it into the doctor's office, that new doctor's office that you just signed up. ship the box or go do the install. You don't need a very technical person to do install because there's really no configuration at this point. All they need to know how to do is plug in the gateway to your internet, to the internet, the switch into the gateway, and the access point into the switch, right? And then there you go. Once it goes and powers on, it calls home back to the Nebula network, says, hey, who do I belong to? And it says, oh, it's your doctor's office. Okay, bam. Sends the configuration, sends the firmware, uploads that. 5-10 minutes later, the network is up and running with the configurations that you've already pre-configured. So that's really the power of the Nebula Cloud. And then, of course, then you get the visibility. You can use your app to be able to manage and to look at things as well, while you're sitting having a nice drink, like out poolside somewhere to troubleshoot that network. That's like kind of the ultimate IT guy's like dream, right? To be able to do all that. So Nebula does give you that kind of opportunity to be that kind of network management as a network management tool. And we've had, a wide global success, especially in education. So those applications, even since 2014, the numbers probably more now as well. But since 2014, 4,300 schools have chosen Zyxel with 16,000 access points, switches, and gateways and wireless controllers being used in that. So in the smart classroom application, 10 gig is important again as well to ensure that the high density, high concentration of access points that are in the classrooms are making its way back to the core network as fast as possible, or as without bottleneck. Now, of course, we have a lot of digital textbooks. People are using video on iPads that are connected to that wireless. Interactive whiteboards are being used. All of that is using traffic as well, being sent back to maybe a video server, storage server that's on campus, or maybe into the cloud. But again, making sure that the connection, the bottleneck is not there, so that you're not fighting for resources between classrooms. You can imagine 20, 40 classrooms all trying to use YouTube all at the same time, or at least in that kind of time frame. All of that will end up going to a single gigabit port, which would then be a huge bottleneck for that. So again, going to a 10 gig gives you that big option of having a bigger pipe to getting to your core network. And of course, you have your splits of your office, your computer rooms, your computer classrooms that have multiple LAN devices as well as wireless. You're able to mix and match those kinds of networks into this convergence network for the smart classroom. So if you want to find out more about some of the features that we have available, that are specifically made for the smart classrooms, send me an email. We can get you some more information, more detailed. But there are things like content filtering capabilities to make sure that the students are safe, DHCP snooping to make sure that people aren't accidentally plugging in routers, or from a security device, or if it's from a security point of view, being able to try to connect to the network, or to be able to DHCP to the network. We have those kinds of security functions, being able to give access to only certain types of devices or certain user profiles, being able to, again, control the network and lock it down. And of course, on the wireless side, things like being able to load balance that are tailor-made for small, for classrooms, load balance between access points, ensure that you get the best kind of radio signal, the best coverage as well for this kind of high concentration application. We have major successes as well in hospitality. That's kind of one of the main applications that we've been experts in. Over 6,200 hotels have chosen Zyxel, and 220,000 rooms are provided. Internet is provided by Zyxel equipment. So again, this application is another key application that we have expertise in. Again, the network looks very similar than for the classroom, right? You have a lot of devices, you have a lot of access points, even in-room, in-wall access points. And that's kind of the trend. I think that's one of the big trends. Not only is 11AX a trend to make sure that the bandwidth now is being used, we know for sure that hotels are wanting to increase their bandwidth because their customer demands it, right? They want to have a Netflix being able to be streamed. They want to be able to watch YouTube. They want to be able to do streaming, so that that kind of puts, again, the pressure of the bandwidth being used. Before, in the past, people were just checking email, surfing a web page, and that doesn't use like that much bandwidth. It's more more kind of bursty, right? You just load the page, and then the bandwidth goes away because you're reading the page now, right? It just has those bursts. And so load balancing that kind of traffic is really easy on a smaller pipe. But now you're talking about people wanting to do the streaming functionality. So they're using a constant bandwidth. And then so you add another second person. He's adding another constant bandwidth. So the pipe ends up becoming, quite large that you need in order to kind of supply a good quality of service for that. Now, again, if you ignore the backbone and you just have gigabit switches into your network, has gigabit uplinks, if you're not doing any kind of link aggregation uplink, which again is still limited by each port being just gigabit, you're going to be facing the fact that moving all the way back to your NVR, the multicast that's maybe providing the video stream for the channels that are in locally, or the videos on demand kind of functions, those are all going to use bandwidth. And if that is being all consumed in a gigabit port, then it's going to cause a lot of quality issues. And then it's hard to troubleshoot if you just say, hey, well, my wireless doesn't seem like it's working because I can't stream. You may blame it on the wireless, but ultimately it could be that the core of the network is the trouble and the bottleneck. So really be careful on how you design the networks and make sure that you're putting these kind of considerations into play, making sure that your 10 gig network is available. And again, cost effectiveness, it's very affordable to do it now. So just take a look at that. I think the premium price for like the 10 gig is probably just a couple $100 for 4 10 gig ports. So take a look at that for sure. But again, mixed network with IP cameras, and then being able to use some of these advanced features for hospitality functionalities, like your walled garden, your terms of service guest network access, being able to do QoS by port, so you can QoS different types of applications. Of course, VLAN them out, so you have an IP camera network, you have an IPTV network, you have a wireless guest network access. So those can all be then prioritized and be controlled as well. And again, both products that allow for you to have PoE and non-PoE, and then also cloud or non-cloud as well. So here's kind of a direct comparison versus some of the competitors that are out there. You see primarily the XGS 1930s is kind of geared up against like the Netgear 3300 or the D-Link DGS 1510 series. So you can look there. There are some great advantages, not only from a power perspective in the 24 port there versus the Netgear, but also hybrid cloud mode. None of those other switches have like a hybrid cloud, giving you the option to go to Nebula or even offer a free Nebula. We also have fanless versions as well. And also the noise on it is, if you can see across the board there, the noise on it is actually the lowest in this group. We have the restore button, we have those indicators, we have the cloud LED functionalities. It's very compact. We also have CLI support for it. Some layer 3 functions. Let's see some of the difference there. IPv4 and v6 interfaces as well, and routing entries. Layer 3 forwarding tables, things like that. And also we have one thing that people don't realize that we have. It's the zone utility. It's the Zyxel One Network utility. So in standalone mode, you actually have a software application that you can install on a laptop that will automatically do layer 2 detection of your switch devices, and also actually other Zyxel devices, access points, and gateways, and allow for you to configure the IP addresses and things like that, do firmware updates from a mass perspective. So usually when you're doing the install, all of the products have the same IP address, for example, right? And if you plug them all in, then there's going to be an IP conflict. But using this application, it doesn't care about the IP. It uses a link layer 2 function to be able to connect and communicate with these devices. So then you could basically turn on all the switches, plug them all together, daisy chain them however you want. You'll see the MAC addresses appear, and then you can just configure them and then change those IPs as you need. Now, of course, it's also defaulted. These switches are now defaulted to do dynamic DHCP at first. So we'll check to see if you have a DHCP, if you've been wanting to hand it out an IP address, or you can then manually assign those. So some of the strengths of our switch, again, it supports Nebula Flex. It supports the PoE usage LED. It has that restore button. It has a setup wizard as well. So it allows for you to go and set up these devices very quickly and easily, even if you don't know how to use the Zyxel switch. It supports Smart Connect. Again, that's the link layer connectivity that allows for you to detect other devices in the network. So this is in the standalone mode. You can reboot those APs, or maybe check those other, reset the defaults, whatever you may need to do. But it's kind of like a drill through, right? You can log into the switch. It'll see these access points that are Zyxel access points. You can then click on the URL for that switch, and it will take you to that IP management of the AP. And then from there, you can do whatever you need to do as well. So it kind of gives you that jumping hoop if you're not using a cloud managed system. Now, of course, in the cloud, you can then manage the APs, the gateways, all of them individually directly through the cloud. So it provides at least some way for central management to be able to manage and do those batch deployments of those networks. So I wanted to kind of just quickly look as well. Quite often, I think what we do is we kind of shy away from kind of looking at some of the direct competitors. And so I wanted to arm you as a Zyxel, customer, a Zyxel partner, when you have your customers, or you're looking at like a D-Link switch here, for example, the DGS 1510 series, and then kind of really get a glimpse of what the differences are between our product. So we're very aggressive on the pricing as well. So if you do some searches, I think the D-Link right now, when I found it online, it's around $1,200 for a particular range of switch. And I think that's for the 48 port switch. And our switch is $749 with the PoE enabled. So again, it's quite cost effective, very reliable, and gives you still the lifetime warranty on them with no support contracts and things like that. But a lot of the features here being higher powered, typically it has, again, the layer 3 functionality, just overall, just a better switch, especially in the functionalities that we think that we have, that we know that we have, and also that cloud functionality, being able to go to the hybrid is a very powerful tool. So definitely, if you have customers or if you're using yourself, any kind of D-Link switches, we're definitely much more cost effective, I think, in a lot of the cases, as well as being able to have a lot of the feature sets that you may be looking for. Now, I wanted to talk about our partner program. If you're not yet a partner, I encourage you to do so. Go to vars.zyxel.com and sign up. It's free. There's no cost for you. The only thing is, in order to maintain certain tier levels, you just have to have kind of a minimum qualifying sales. So, for example, if you want to be in the silver tier, it's only $6,000 a year. $6,000 per 6 months. So it's only $1K per month is your average, right? And that's very achievable in that sense. But what it gives you is it gives you access to the extra discount margins, the 16%. I believe we're running a promotion, or I think we're running right now, that if you are a new partner, you're automatically sitting at the silver tier. So you start out at the silver tier to get those benefits right away. Free webinars, free tech support, local tech support here in the US, lease financing options if you need, dedicated account managers, so you have somebody to talk to, not only from the sales side, but also from the tech support side as well. And then, of course, lead referrals. If you move to the gold tier, you get lead referrals, access to system engineers, advanced replacement, things like that. Now, gold is where you want to be, obviously, because you get an additional 4 points of margin there. So the discount is at distribution. So you would get 16% off of the distribution price, which honestly, like when you finally sell it and look at what maybe the online price is, you'll be making anywhere between 16 to 20% margin on hardware. So this kind of goes across the board on a lot of our products that are the business class products. So we're really here to aggressively give our partners benefit. If you're selling stuff like Ubiquity or anything like that, you're making zero margin on the hardware, really. You're just providing a platform, and then you're trying to then sell the customer on your services, that's your value add. But here, why not sell something that also has similar price point, but then gives you this a lot more margin that you can either pass on to the customer a few points to be very cost effective, or be an advantage even if they look online. You can give them that kind of discount, but you still have a lot of room to be able to provide your services on top of that. So that's what we partner with D&H, Ingram Micro, Cynix, and also Wave to be to deliver these products to you. If you have any issues with any kind of stock at any one of those distributors, make sure you reach out to your sales rep, because they can always work on a drop shipping function. Especially if we have it in our local warehouse in Anaheim, we can drop ship it directly to you through the distribution. So we do that all the time. So make sure that you reach out, keep in touch with your sales rep. If you have any issues, if you have any product related questions, things like that, go through your sales rep. They will bring me in. Or you can also email me as well. So here's my email address. It's try@zyxel.com. If you have any questions, concerns, if you have any projects that you're working on that I can help you with and talk you through which applications are good, or what products to use in any particular application, we do that all the time. So make sure you reach out to do that. So right now, the dates on the slide there is wrong. We have actually a new one coming out on August for a new partner intro. That one's a little bit, forgot to edit that one. But if you have any questions at this moment, I'm going to open up to a Q&A session. feel free to, let me know. You can send that in the Q&A and I will answer that. Statement on, let me read that real quick. Yeah, basically you could use your standard Ethernet cable to do that. I think it's Cat5e, I think you can use it. So it depends on the speed as well. So there is, you might have to check on the exact, I'm not familiar with the exact one, but I'm pretty sure that you can still do 10 gig on, or at least more than 1 gig on your normal Cat5. But I think it has to be a certain Cat5 cable there, Stuart. May we email links for previous Tech Talk recordings? Carnegie, yes, you can send me an email. It also should be available in the VAR side. If you are a VAR partner, if you log into your VAR's portal, vars.zyxel.com, there should be recordings for the previous webinars, both on Tech Talk, also some of the Nebula webinars, and also the specific webinars that we've done in the past as well. So those should be there. If they're not, again, send me an email. I will point you to our marketing team to kind of figure out where that is, but that's where it should be. Again, if you guys don't have any questions, you can feel free to drop off, or you can just listen in and wait till the end. But I just wanted to say thank you very much for hanging out today and spending the time that you did today with me to be to find out a little bit more about this. I hope it was helpful to you. You can always send me feedback on how we can do better. If you have specific topics, we're always looking for, what do you want to know? If there are specific topics that you as a partner want to learn more about in regards to Zyxel products, applications that could be helpful to you, whether it be voice, whether it be wireless, things like that, send me an email. We will make, the Tech Talk, we want to make sure, again, it's engaging to you, and that the information that we send or that we speak of here is informative and useful to you, right? We want you to be partnered with us in that. So let us know, or let me know what you want to hear, what you want to talk about during these sessions, and we want to run them, as often as we can every Tuesday, and be able to give you that kind of information and have that kind of relationship, be able to talk at least in this kind of format. Hopefully later on, as the format builds, I'm looking forward to being able to do it where we would have actually live talk through your mic, right? So you would just go on mic to ask the questions. We have basically a discussion forum that we can just talk live. You talking to me rather than through a chat box. We just talk as if we were, sitting across the table from each other. But cool thing about the internet, we can be doing that while we're sitting half a world's away. So if there are no questions at this time, again, thank you so much for being a Zyxel partner if you are. If not, again, sign up to be a partner. It's free. But we hope to be your networking ally, and hope to see you again at another Tech Talk soon. So keep in mind, or just make sure that your email is not blocking this kind of messaging on the spam side of things, so that you can be informed of the upcoming webinars that we're having. So you'll see that coming out soon in the next few days. So again, thank you so much. We'll see you again next time at Zyxel Tech Talk. My name is Tri. Good night or good day.